Entrepreneurs solve problems. They make the world a better place. They create jobs. They create wealth, not only for themselves, but for the entire community. And when you foster that, you can accelerate not only a company, but an entire economy. And that's why it's so important to support Startup Week.
Happy Startup Week, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff show for this year's festivities. I'm joined today by no other than Don Berger. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Don, it's interesting. How come you're here?
Well, I have big shoes to fill. Unfortunately, yesterday, Sunday, mid-afternoon, I received a call from Nick, one of the key organizers of Startup Week, telling me that he won't be able to make it because out of an abundance of caution, he's staying at home because he may have been exposed to COVID. And the organizing committee actually had a plan to address this very thing. And he said, can you jump in and help co-host? So I said, why the hell not?
This was yesterday.
That's right. Yeah, it was yesterday. Slight show of resilience. So be resilient is our theme. We'll talk about that a lot.
On point.
And I said, sure, why not? I'll be happy to do whatever I can since I'm unemployed.
So a little bit about yourself. You recently moved to Boise.
I did.
Very relevant to Boise Startup Week. You are a founder of Social Tables. Tell us just briefly about Social Tables and sort of how you landed here.
Sure. So if you want to get the full scoop, you can tune in at 5:30 for my founder war story that I'll be doing where Nick actually interviews me on his farm, which is a beautiful place. But basically I did a road trip during pandemic to pass the time and visited Idaho for the first time and fell in love with it. And the tech community is one of the main, if not the top reason I moved here, because I saw the amount of energy in this very event that made me say, you know what, this place seems really awesome. And so far I've been here 4 months and I think I've been right. And I'm really happy about that. And for those who don't know, I'm one of your tenants because I have an office in Trailhead.
Oh, the landlord-tenant relationship. Here we go. Yeah, I like that. Tell me more about that. No, I'm the executive director at Trailhead.
That's right.
And you've
done that for how long?
Been there for just over 2 years now.
Yeah, and that's one more year. You've done Startup Week for more than that.
Yeah, this is my third year at Startup Week. So, quick story, I took the job at Trailhead 6 weeks before Startup Week. And of course, my board didn't tell me that, oh, by the way, you're going to organize this thing called Startup Week. So I cursed it to hell and back. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. It was just, it's overwhelming. So I was you yesterday, but I was cowering. Needless to say, dude, Startup Week really made the difference for me as the executive director at Trailhead. What better way to get immersed into the ecosystem, roll up your sleeves, and get shoulder to shoulder to entrepreneurs and work on this great event. So I'm excited for you because you're going to get the same experience as the Nick stand-in. Let's call you that, right?
And speaking of, I believe, just reached our registration goal at Startup Week.
Huge news, yes. We have 1,500 official registered, and that is for a virtual event unheard of to me, especially in recent months. Most folks are just ADD on Zoom. Attention being called for from all over the place. 1,500 of those people are registered, but also, aside from just the number of registrant, you're able to watch Startup Week completely live this year, both on YouTube and Facebook, Twitch, I believe on LinkedIn. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but our camera team here will correct me on that. So there's different channels on how you want to consume Startup Week this year. So very different from the years past.
And speaking of this week, let's talk about the theme.
Be resilient, indeed. Yes. So your first move of resiliency was to step in 24-hour notice with no schedule or no knowledge of whatsoever what you are to expect in the coming week. But resiliency really is defined in Startup Week terms, if you will, as using adversity as fuel for innovation, creativity. And so back in March when we decided to pivot to a virtual event, it was tough. The decision itself, the playbook we've let unfold year after year that led to all the success around Startup Week no longer was viable. And so we had to find ways to be resilient. And in that, we had to put pretty strict plans in place, which led to Nick quarantining himself and us being blessed with you here today. So be resilient is holding true all the way around.
Well, if only we all were as serious about this pandemic as Nick is.
I have to say, I'm a little jealous of Nick, to be honest.
Whoa. What do you mean? This is breaking news.
Yeah. So since he's not here, I can say this. Him and I always joke about, Startup Week is the conference that him and I want to go to. Like that's sort of our mantra as we put this thing together. If something isn't, cool enough to us or interesting enough to us, we don't want to feature it. And so we do it every year. We plan. We come to Startup Week. It takes place over a week in person here at Jump, and we don't get to watch any of it or consume any of it. We're just running around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Well, it's funny because I come from the event world, obviously, having spent the last decade in events, and we always say the best events are the ones where the hosts have the worst time because they're busy making sure everyone else is having a good time.
So we were having the best events.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. But he basically gets, and he said this himself, he basically gets to consume and watch Startup Week almost as an attendee. So, in terms of be resilient, and which is our motto, as you said, obviously it's printed big time on our shirts, but really what you'll see at Startup Week is going to be just a plethora of content, right? 80 plus individual sessions. To get the full immersive experience, I highly recommend that all of the viewers register Umbrella. That's our event platform. And I know you also are hosting a virtual showcase Umbrella for small businesses and startups, right?
Yeah, that's right. And what I love about the fact that virtual events are bringing to bear is the fact that you could actually do more in the same amount of time. So for example, for those of you who attended a conference, I could assume a lot of the viewers or registrants and attendees, this may be their first conference. So if it's your first conference, usually conference is one set for 2, 3, 5 days. You go to a place and you try to fit in as much as possible. Maybe you leave one session to go to another. Maybe you leave one networking reception and go to another. Maybe you try to meet somebody and you can't get in front of them because they're too busy, or you can't see them, or they have to run somewhere else. So what I love about the fact that we're virtual is that you can do so much more with the same amount of resources from your own home. So whether it's attending a startup showcase, that's essentially virtual trade show booths, and speak to founders or network or watch videos, you can all do it simultaneously or back to back, or whenever is convenient for you. And that allows you to do much, much more as opposed to in person.
And since we're talking about benefits though too, I think the thing to point out for our audience is you can real-time chat with people and other attendees Umbrella. You can real-time chat with the speakers. So during any content session that you're logged into, you can directly chat with the speakers as they will be there too. And aside from booking meetings right on the spot, chatting with all the people that are at the event, I think another advantage of doing it virtually this year with Brella is that we can just cast such a wider net, both for speakers and in terms of attendance. It used to be a requirement to be here in person. And Idaho is a big state and there's lots of rural communities. And this year I'm really excited for them to tune in and participate.
Yeah, I think the point you're making is one that's actually highlighted in one of the sessions this week, and that's about inclusion. And the idea that you are virtual, you don't have to travel, you don't necessarily have to take time off work, you don't have to find parking, pay for parking. You can do everything from the comfort of your own home, and that allows us to be more inclusive this year, more than ever.
So we're painting the picture, it's all rosy, right? Well, there's something to be said about the in-person experience.
Definitely.
And really our take to all of this is we're trying to offset the things that we're losing about that format by making sure that the things we're gaining sort of either replace them or even outperform those losses. And so that said, again, for the full immersive experience, go to Brella, log in, create a profile. Starts out a little bit like a dating app. They're going to ask you some questions about yourself in order to let the AI tool do its job.
And if I may say, because I learned this the hard way, I know all the tags for what you're interested in and who you are may be intimidating, but please, if you just choose whatever you're interested in, it take you literally 30 seconds. There are a lot of tags, but it's really easy. And that really makes networking and connecting with other people that much better. And I know there are probably some people out there, much like myself many years ago, maybe like you, we're both immigrants, who kind of thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to network, that's scary. Hopefully virtual networking or virtual connecting makes it a little easier. But I would also say that that's what's the most important thing about any startup community or any community in general, is making sure the connective tissue is there, making sure that people are knowing that there are other resources, other people in their shoes, people who can have shared experiences that may be valuable to them. So instead of thinking of it networking as a to-do, think about it as really paying it forward within your community and helping the Boise startup scene grow, much like we're doing through this Startup Week.
In a way, networking is the attendees' way of contributing to evolve the ecosystem.
Definitely.
Which is our mission here at Startup Week. That's why we do what we do, is evolving the ecosystem. Startups are just such an integral part of a thriving economy, right? So that's why we support startups. And to your point, yes, please get into Brella. As a matter of fact, right now you can get into Brella and drop comments. You can put links in there, start engaging with us directly. I believe Nick Krabs, my co-chair, who can't be here with us today, is on live right now, and I'm sure that if you bait him with any kind of comment, he will take you up on it. And so, happy chatting with Nick on that point, on that front.
And for those who want to get in touch with you, Tim, they can do, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Brella as well. I will be on Brella when I'm not here talking to either you or one of our guests. Brella is really the best way to get in touch with me. I'll be watching as many of the sessions as I can and pouring in with questions.
Awesome. Do you want to cover some of the tracks we have going on?
Great segue. Let's do that. So, aside from the fact that we have 9 unique tracks, which to the audience may matter or not, it's just our way of breaking down and palletizing content at Startup Week. But what I want to make sure of is that I acknowledge and I thank the people who are running those tracks. They do so as volunteers. Startup Week is entirely run by volunteers. And so this year, we have 9 tracks, like I said. The health track was led by Chris Hoyd from Vinyl. The food track was led by Matt Gilkerson from Trailhead, my peer.
Shout out, Matt.
Shout out to Matt, as well as Angela Taylor from Dignitas Agency. The tech track this year was led by a pair from Vinyl, Nicole Harris-Roberts and Eric Herring. The start track was led by Jack Boren. I was personally excited about that because Jack Boren is with Epic Ventures. They're based in Salt Lake. They're a VC firm. And Jack has a sizable portfolio here in the Boise area. So we're really glad to adding him onto the track chairs this year. The Grow track is led by Karen Appelgren from the Idaho Department of Commerce and George Tanner from U of I. Our youth track is led by a pair from One Stone High School, Michael Colin and Ashley Greenwood.
And just a quick pause, Tim, on the youth track. This is the first year we actually have a youth pitch competition. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm glad you pointed that out. So we're giving away $7,000, Youth Innovation Challenge. Again, register for free, tune into Brella. All the details will be there. You will find a problem statement that our partners and sponsors have provided us with, videos, and college students and high school kids get to reverse engineer a problem statement, pitch it back to us, win cash in the end. Sound good to you?
That sounds awesome.
Okay, cool. The last 2 tracks, our new track from last year was the social impact track. That's led by Kenton Lee from Because International, The Shoe That Grows, and Christina Berry-Simmons from Umpqua Bank. Lastly, our new addition this year, really excited about the Arts, Media, and Design track. Stephanie Cook was formerly with the Idaho National Laboratory, led that for us this year. And so thank you all for all the work, many hours you've put in. Couldn't have done Startup Week without you. And again, for those going into Brella, you're able to filter out the schedule by track, the ones I just read out, or just by day, or however you please.
Awesome.
On that note, you brought up the
I
youth
just checked on
innovation.
time. We're doing good on time.
We're doing good. I want to squeeze in one more thing.
Sure.
Within these tracks, there's 2 other pitch competitions I want to highlight.
Yes.
Trailmix pitch competition.
Trailmix is...
a food product pitch competition. Winner gets $20,000. Runner-up gets $5,000.
And also gets on Albertson's shelf.
Which is the real prize.
Yes.
It's the much coveted shelf on Albertsons. We also have our 20K pitch competition, and like the name says, the winner gets $20,000. The runner-up gets $5,000. And so just another way of being resilient is Startup Week pours money into our startup community.
Totally. And I remember the first check my last company ever got. First check, not the last check. Last check was a little bigger. The first check
You hope so, yeah.
my company got was $25,000 from the pitch competition. And
So those are meaningful,
so
right?
those
They
are
get you-
super meaningful.
They get you to the next
yes,
milestone.
They're so important. And I was on the pitch competition selection committee, and there were a total between Trailmix and the pitch competition, over 70 startups that applied to pitch.
And we're featuring last year's winners too. So as you go through the content, again, Umbrella, we call them out. Washi won last year. Free to Feed won last year. For Trailmix, we had Orchestra Provisions as a winner. She's also featured in the Albertsons Chef Showcase, which is actually up next.
Oh, okay, cool.
We're gonna segue to that. So
And before we do that, should we give a shout out to some of our sponsors?
let's do that. Thank you for reminding me. We won't get to all of them now, but let's give it a shot. So starting with the STEM Action Center. So this is the Idaho STEM Action Center. Albertsons, Holland & Hart, Perkins Coie, Alturas Capital, University of Idaho with their partner sponsor, Wells Fargo, Holly Troxel, Bank of Idaho, Micron Technology, Blue Cross of Idaho, and Vinyl. I'm going to stop there. The name Vinyl, you might have noticed, both on the track chair side and on the committee side, heavily represented. They're all over this place. Again, Nick can't be here with us today, but in spirit, thank you, Vinyl. Thank you, Nick. Thank you to all of our sponsors. We really couldn't do this without them. And with that, the Albertsons Chef Showcase, Kelly Sutter, who is a chef at Albertsons, is going to cook you a vegetarian burrito bowl. And please,
I got to go to that. See you later.
sounds yummy. And with that, he will use ingredients from a Trailmix winner. So as you watch the video, in the very beginning, you'll catch and walk through the aisles and pick out Kate Stoddart's and Orchestra Provisions cricket-based protein.
Awesome. We'll see you back very soon.
Hi, my name is Kelly Suter with you at the beautiful Albertsons on Broadway, ready to share with you an exciting recipe, one that I'm passionate about that combines Peruvian cooking techniques with a very unique spice from Orchestra Provisions. Kate last year won the competition at Trailmix with these spices, and I gotta tell you, they're very unique, and I think that you'll see why here in a little bit. I've picked two out to share with you. One is a pico grillo seasoning. It's like a Mexican spice blend, think taco seasoning, but without all the bad stuff. And then Himalayan sea salt to add a little extra sodium. And I'm using it here, and you can also use it for any recipe that you might think needs that extra little sodium factor. But what's unique about these seasonings is that it uses crickets. It's a sustainable protein and a food source that's really unique, and I gotta tell you, they are delicious. And so what I'm gonna share with you today is a recipe, and it's a vegetarian burrito bowl. So it's really got a lot of produce. It's got cilantro, zucchini, tomatoes, onions, cabbage, tomatoes, and so on. And so it's gonna be basically really simple ingredients, but once they're together, it really ends up with some complex flavors, and it's really beautiful. And you know, the philosophy is that food does bring people together, so I'm going to serve this family style, and I suggest that you can do the same if you were to try it out. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. And so the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna make a garnish. It's almost like a garnished salad. It's called salsa criolla. And it utilizes 4 simple ingredients: red onions, limes, cilantro, and then we're gonna use a little bit of that Himalayan sea salt. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and do this ahead of time, and I wanna make this now so it marinates just a little bit, so by the time the dish is plated, it'll be so flavorful with those ingredients melded together. So I'm gonna go ahead and move this out of the way, and the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna chop up 1 red onion. And so to do that, And there's many ways to cut a red onion, but I tell you, maybe I'm doing it right, maybe I'm doing it wrong, but this is the way I've done it for such a long time. We're gonna go ahead and take the ends off. And what I like to do is I like to just cut through that outer layer, and then I just basically pull the outside off with the knife. I want to avoid getting my nails in there, so to speak. So I'll just pull it off. Let's get rid of our onion paper. And the key to cutting this onion and the key to this Sarza criolla is to cut as thin as you possibly can, because the lime and the salt is gonna break that down. So we're gonna just chop it right in half. And like I said, we are going for super, super thin slices. Beautiful little thin slices. Let's go ahead and put these right here in our bowl. And really, this is gonna be a garnish, but this could also be almost a side salad too. So if you wanted to throw a couple extra onions in there, save it for later, it's almost better after it sits for a few hours. So we'll go ahead and chop this guy up all the way, being very careful there at the end, right? So we'll go ahead and add these. And then, you know, the onions are just stuck together a little bit, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna close our tongs so we don't damage the onions and loosen it up just a little bit. Beautiful so far. All right, next we are gonna add fresh lime juice. And the freshest you can get is basically right from the lime. So we'll start with just about, I would say for this quantity of onion, 3 limes, halved. Nice and easy. I got my little lime juicer hidden away over here. And like I said, this is almost best prepared maybe about an hour ahead of time. Other takes on Sarza criolla would be to rinse the red onions prior to use, so you have that real clean, crisp onion flavor. All right, really coming together here. This is really gonna be dynamite. All right, and now I'm gonna add the cilantro. I've got a little bit pre-chopped here, and you know, this came from just right downstairs from Albertsons, as fresh as you can get. So I'm adding about 2 tablespoons worth of cilantro, and you can see this is coarsely chopped, meaning partial cuts of the leaves. And for the spotlight spice, this Himalayan sea salt, and you can see it there, it's very fine, which is good because it'll disperse throughout the salad. So we're just gonna season that in there just a little bit. And I probably put in this about a half teaspoon. So the key to this is to thoroughly mix and let this sit. You really want that lime juice to permeate that red onion and start to break it down just a little bit. And this is gonna add a zing, a tang to your dish. It's gonna excite those taste buds of your family members or guests. So there we've got Sarza criolla, beautiful. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just set this aside, and we're gonna move on. And so this dish has my take on Peruvian black beans. And unlike, you know, most chilies or other uses for black beans, I rinsed the black beans. And I know that, oh, you know, we've got to keep the, you know, the beans in the juice when you use it. Not for Peruvian black beans. And so really, just 3 ingredients to this simple preparation of black beans. I am going to preheat this cast iron pan just a little bit. Now it does take a little bit longer for cast iron pans to heat, but once it's hot, it stays hot, so you really gotta watch that heat. So like I said, we've got just a few ingredients here. We've got vegetable stock, black beans, and then just a little bit of pre-chopped garlic. You can chop it yourself if that's something that you want to do, but it's raw garlic, and that is important. So let's go ahead here, move on over to our cast iron pan. And a good way to tell if this is hot is the viscosity of that oil. And this is something that we want to have the oil piping hot. We don't want to put garlic into a cold pan. So you can see it's warming up as we speak. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the heat up here a little bit. So, and what makes this Peruvian really is, a lot of red onion, a lot of garlic. We're gonna roast this garlic here in just a moment. So I'm gonna go ahead and open my little garlic thing that's very tight. So, and this dish serves, I would say maybe 4 people or so. So let's go ahead and add our garlic, about a tablespoon. You can hear a little sizzle there. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this up just a little bit. The best thing about these black beans is when you are cooking with garlic and it's starting to brown and that smell gets in the air, that is really what kind of makes me hungry. All right, little sizzle there. So when we're going to brown this garlic, now, you want to be careful not to get it, too dark brown. You want this just slightly brown. Go ahead and turn this up a little bit. This is really gonna come out very good. And so I have used just pre-chopped garlic, got it right downstairs. That is browning up nicely, filling the air. I know you can't smell it, I can smell it, it smells terrific. So I know you're sitting there thinking, okay, he's gonna add vegetable stock to unrinsed black beans. Why would he do this? Well, to me, vegetable broth or vegetable stock adds a great depth of flavor. It's really, boiled vegetables essentially reduced down to that, core depth of flavor, which is exciting. And when you add that to rinsed black beans, you have very deep flavor there. So I would say we're getting pretty close on our garlic here. Let's go ahead and add our black beans. Like I said, I've got about 3 cans of black beans here. So I'm gonna go ahead, add those. You can hear the sizzle, just put this aside. Then I just really want to incorporate that garlic throughout. Gotcha, and all we're doing here is we're just warming this up. And whenever you're warming something that's pre-cooked, you do want to get it to boiling point. So we're going to go ahead and add our vegetable stock here. I'm just going to go ahead and turn our pan up a little bit. You can do this in a stock pot. You can do this in a saute pan. Perfect. And the amount of stock that you're adding is just up to the level of the black beans. Great. And then when this simmers just for a little while, that is really going. And this, kind of like the salsa criolla, is something that when it sits overnight or about 4 hours, you really have a great dish. You could actually put this right in the oven too if you needed more stovetop space. It would probably take, I would say, maybe 30 minutes at 400. Of course, you would want to cover it so it wouldn't evaporate too much. Beautiful. And most of the time when you pick up a cast iron pan, it does come pre-seasoned. If you were to season it, it usually takes a little bit of oil and then in the oven for about an hour at 500 degrees. And it's a good idea to season your cast iron pan maybe after every 3 or 4 uses. Great, that's coming to a nice boil. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna pull this off, let this sit, and I will trade places because we've got something else that we need to cook. Great. All right, so we will let that sit there. I'll go ahead and turn this off and kind of clean up just a little bit. So the next part that we're gonna do is really the highlight of this dish, and that is roasted vegetables. And like I said, this is a vegetarian dish, so there really is a lot going on and a lot of vegetables. So let's go ahead and get started. And so I have picked a variety of vegetables, 1 to add color and 2 to add flavor. So let's go ahead and we're gonna start with 1 white onion and basically preparing it the same way that we did with our zarza criolla. So we're gonna take off the end here, cut first layer off, peel back with the knife, just like so, holding it down. We'll discard this paper, cut it right in half, and then we're gonna do 1/4-inch thick slices. Great. And with the variety of vegetables that we're using, you might find that they roast at different time periods. For me, it takes longer to roast or saute an onion than it does, say, bell pepper. So that's why we're gonna add this first. So we've got our onion prepared here. Put that to the side. Now we're going to add a yellow squash, just discarding the end. And what I like to do is I like to get these in bite-sized pieces. These have a high water content, so once they roast down a little bit, they'll shrink. And I'm just gonna cut these on a slight bias using the tip of my knife. You can see the color starting to come together already. And again, we're doing a little over 1/4-inch thick slices. I did have this long way. Great. We're gonna find our little green zucchini, taking off the end, taking off this end, just a little guy there at the end. I'm gonna go ahead and half this lengthwise. Same repetition. Great. We'll move this over so we have a little more room. Same story with this guy. You can see this one is a little bit wider, so we're getting some bigger pieces there in the middle. And I'm just gonna cut those right in half. Awesome. Now let's transition to our bell peppers. I did grab 1 of each color downstairs, except for the orange. And like the onion, now I know there are quite a few ways to cut a bell pepper. You can cut it how you like. This is how I do it. I take it right down the center, and then I peel out the stem using my thumb and knocking out the seeds. Let me go ahead and do it right here for you, just peeling it out. And for me, this method does not waste any of the bell pepper. So actually, I am gonna do these two so I can cut these all at once, right down the middle, taking my thumb, pulling out the stem, and knocking out the seeds. And repeat. You want to be right over a receptacle because these seeds do have a tendency to go everywhere, as you know. And you can see we've got some yellows, some greens, some reds. Beautiful, fresh bell peppers. Thumb to the stem, knocking out the seeds. Now, a lot of folks might take the excess flesh inside. You can certainly do that. A little bit there doesn't really bother me. That's really gonna cook away anyway. And so what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to cut these about the same width as our onions. And just so I can work with this just a little bit better, I'm gonna cut this in half and then just go right down the sides with our bell pepper. And you know, with this dish, it looks like we might even get away with just using half of each color versus the entire bell pepper. I can think of quite a few dishes that I can use the excess half of each color. Okay, I'm gonna quarter this one and then go right into it again. Now remember earlier I talked about how warm our cast iron pan should be. Let's go over, I did heat this up just a little bit beforehand. Ooh, it's feeling nice and hot. So, just gonna add a little oil to this, warm our oil up. I'm using about an ounce of oil here. Now remember, our goal here is to saute these vegetables. Saute means to jump. And the key to this is we want the moisture in these vegetables to evaporate. We don't want to steam these vegetables. That'll add just too much moisture. We want the essence of that vegetable. And to saute those is really the only way to do that. Great, preserve my half. And then let's add our bread. Nice thin slices. Awesome, so those are ready to go. And then just for a little kick, I think I am going to add a little bit of jalapeno to this. So I am going to cut this lengthwise. And for me, I'm sorry, but I do love spice. So I'm gonna keep the seeds in there. I really enjoy the spice. I know what you're thinking, Kelly, don't touch your eyes or your face after this. I did try these, this batch earlier. They're not super spicy, so I'm not too concerned with these. I am going to cut little strips through here. I lied, I am gonna take some of the seeds out, but leaving some of them. Great. All right, and then we are going to mince these little guys. So I cut half of the jalapeno lengthwise, and then I've cut that half into little strips, and now I am just going to mince these little guys up. Now, the one thing about this pico grillo seasoning is that I was surprised at how spicy it was. And it's not spicy that it's gonna, send you running out of the house, but be prepared for it, which I was excited. I love spicy. Okay, great. So you can see that our oil is nice and hot. It's even smoking a little bit, which means let's go ahead and get our ingredients in there. So we are going to add our onions. Beautiful. Kind of getting them all over the base of the pan. Great. See, gonna knock that guy open there. All right, and I can tell just by looking at this guy, I need a scotch more oil, and that might mean half a teaspoon or so. All right. Let's go ahead, saute these bad boys up. All right, I'm gonna turn our temp down just a little bit, and I'm gonna add our other ingredients. Squash, zucchini, great, a little bit of bell pepper, doesn't that look beautiful? Great. And then let's add our jalapeno. And I think for that size of pan, I think that's a good amount of ingredients. Like I said, I didn't want to overload the pan. Now, the question is, when should I add the seasoning? You do not want to add the seasoning at the very beginning, because what it's going to do is it's going to clump up, it's going to stick to the outside of the vegetables, and it could even burn. So you want to wait until the vegetables just soften a little bit to add your seasoning. That way, the vegetables will absorb that seasoning and it'll cook out just a little bit better. And you do want to roast the seasoning just a little bit. Cooking it really opens up those spices and subsequently the flavor. Great. Now that is really coming along nicely. Super. Okay, and we'll let those roast for just a little bit. Super. Then of course, as we're waiting, go ahead and just take a moment and turn your salsa criolla. Great. I'm just gonna move these aside just a little bit. Now what I tend to do is if I have people over at my house for an event, if I have family, I find that I will end up cooking multiple batches of this, kind of refilling the dish, so to speak. Great. Now you can see those are starting to brown up just a little bit, soften up, which I think is a perfect time for the seasoning. Great. And like I said, this one is called pico grillo. It's a Mexican style seasoning, and it's very fine, which is great because that means it's gonna distribute very well throughout the vegetables. And for this amount, I am going to add about a tablespoon. Perfect. That smells tremendous. All right. Now what you want to be careful of too is spice sticking to the bottom of the pan, and because this is a Peruvian style, enter soy sauce. And we're just gonna deglaze the bottom of the pan just a little bit. Beautiful. Now you can really see it reducing in size. Very colorful. Let's make sure we get it equally distributed. Great. There we go. That is really coming along nicely. Now, I believe we have enough zing with our salsa criolla. One thing you might try is just a little bit of white vinegar in this to bring out the flavor of those onions. Great. That is just about where I want it. You can cook it longer if you would like, if you like your vegetables super soft. I like them just with like a little hint of crunch. Great. You're gonna see how beautiful this turns out to be. We're gonna go ahead and put this dish together. You see, it hasn't really taken me very long to do this. Great, so those are sizzling. And I did save a little time, and I did pre-cook some brown rice, and of course you can follow your packaging instructions for this. Brown rice takes a little bit longer than white rice. This takes about 40 to 50 minutes, but it's something you can just set on the stove, bring to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and then wait, and then let the stove do the rest. Super. All right, so I am gonna go ahead and start plating brown rice. Like I said, family style, so I'm gonna get a decent amount on here. And I wanna break this up into thirds, rice on one side, black beans on the other, and then our wonderful vegetable mixture in the middle. Super. I'm gonna come around here, grab our black beans. You can see the garlic in there. Great. Around. Turn our heat off here. Now I think for these, I am going to use tongs. That really smells tremendous. Right there in the middle. Like a lot of veggies. Great. And now for the fun part, the garnishes. Of course, we have our beautiful Zarza criolla here that I think from a color standpoint really contrasts well with the black beans. I'm gonna kind of ball this up a little bit, the size of a softball or so. And now remember, this is a deconstructed burrito, so we have the makings for a burrito. So I'm gonna do over here a little bit of cabbage. I am gonna do a little bit of tomato right here on the side. Got a little in the cabbage there, no big deal. A little bit more. And then I had grilled off scallion and whole jalapenos that I am just gonna lay right across there. We'll garnish with cilantro. And then finally, a little cilantro dusting over the top. So and there you have it, a deconstructed vegetarian burrito utilizing orchestra provision spices.
I'm Molly, I'm your Albertsons local registered dietitian, and just really love how wonderfully this dish came together with lots of color and lots of produce full of nutrients. So Kelly picked some really awesome produce to showcase and blended those flavors together beautifully. So we've got lots of color, lots of texture, picking up the produce from our local store here, plus all of that local and fresh produce. It's gonna do so many great health benefits for us. So especially like this cabbage, which is a great prebiotic fiber for our gut microbiota. In addition to the fiber from the beans, our gut is gonna be so happy and healthy. So getting lots of fiber from this dish because it's mostly plants. And being plant-based or plant-forward doesn't have to be plants only. So this is a great way to kind of showcase that as we incorporated the orchestra provision spices and then really had just a great spread from the veggies. Another great thing that Kelly added here as kind of a finishing touch for us was some avocado. Now I love adding avocados to any dish. It's gonna boost up that great just monounsaturated fat in addition to the olive oil that he used to saute the beans as well. So having the extra virgin olive oil and the avocados are a great way to add in monounsaturated fats, which is also gonna then really kind of grab onto all those vitamins and minerals in that awesome produce and help absorb it better. So especially vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K, they need a little bit of that awesome healthy fat to be absorbed into our bodies. So we always want to pair those together. And speaking of pairings, Kelly did a great job of pairing beans and rice together. I love that he chose brown rice. Again, more fiber, a whole grain, so we're getting more nutrients. But the beans and the rice are going to be a complete protein, meaning we're getting all 9 essential amino acids that we need in this dish. So that's why it's a great option for doing a vegetarian meal. We don't have to add meat if we don't want to. If you've got meat eaters at home that are looking a little bit for that texture, Kelly also suggested that we could add mushrooms. And mushrooms are a great alternative if you're looking for some of that meat texture. They'll blend right in. And even if you don't have mushroom eaters at home, they're a great kind of texture addition, plus boosting up the nutrient of this dish. So all of these flavors and produce play together well in this dish, and they plate beautifully. And like Kelly said, we eat with our eyes, and good food should be enjoyed.
Thank you so much for joining me during Boise Startup Week. So excited to be with you. And of course, I did get all these ingredients here at the Albertsons on Broadway. But of course, we do have these ingredients in an Albertsons near you. I hope to see you soon and have a great week.
Welcome back, Startup Week. Hope you enjoyed the chef showcase with Kelly Suter from Albertsons. Hope you were able to cook up that vegetarian burrito bowl.
You expected people to cook?
That's kind of the point.
But they were learning to cook, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, you can pause it, you can
Okay.
rewind, and you can hit play. I mean, they're still cooking. Let's put it
Don't
that way.
forget, Startup Week is now available, either live or pre-recorded. So if you really like that, you can go back and check it out. Go to your local Albertsons, shop what you need to shop for, and make that burrito bowl.
You know, on that note, some of the ingredients that Kelly was picking up as he walked through the store, one that stood out to me was Orchestra Provisions.
They won Trailmix last year.
That's right. And the cool part about Kate's company is that it's cricket-powered seasoning. It's protein-rich, sustainable, and it tastes fantastic. So I was really glad Kelly was able to integrate that into his dish. And I think you learned something new too, didn't you, Don?
I did. I learned how to cut peppers. I usually cut peppers on each side and then I slice them. But cutting down the middle and then gutting them with your fingers is pretty awesome.
So I'm sure you're going to go home and try that tonight.
I'm more of a takeout kind of guy.
Okay, cool. On that note, since Albertsons is one of the major sponsors, let me just say at this point, we're glad they did this because this was their version of pivoting. Usually we host a luncheon, private luncheon, for all of the Trailmix participants at Albertsons headquarters. This year, obviously, we can't do that, so they agreed to do a showcase with Kelly. So super excited about that. But let's move on to what's ahead. And before we do, I know I got through halfway in my sponsor list.
Right.
So let me just give the rest of our sponsors the honor they deserve on this little live session here. Picking up where I left off, Vinyl was the last sponsor. We want to thank Dairy West, who is actually a Trailmix sponsor, the City of Boise, Stoll Reeves, the CCDC, and that's the Capital City Development Corporation, Idaho Central Credit Union, Lamb Weston, Stage.0, really excited about those guys joining in this year, Boise State University, Epic Ventures, Simplot, Coding Dojo, Vacasa, one of my former employers, iGEM from the Department of Commerce, Cradlepoint, Count, Zions Bank, Umpqua Bank, Happy Day Brands, Inspire Media, Kitchen to Shelf, and last but not least, Tech Help.
You know, Tim, as I hear you naming all these great sponsors, I'm floored by the breadth of sponsors that are at Boise Startup Week this week, or this year. From banks to startups, now bigger companies, and venture capitalists and governmental organizations, academic institutions. That's so awesome, and just I think really exemplifies the reach of the startup community in Idaho.
Yeah, reach is one thing I'd point out, and the other thing too, I mean, the folks that you just listed, they represent the real stakeholders of any startup ecosystem.
That's right.
And so we're just blessed, for one, that they're engaged, especially blessed that they're engaged this year because it's a tough year. And, you know, in return also, with the format and everything being pre-recorded, these assets are evergreen. So like you said earlier, you can go back and watch Kelly's cooking show. And so that means for all the other assets too.
Next year, sponsorship will be more expensive.
Yes, thank you for that key takeaway and segue to what I want to talk about next. So Don, we get to watch you do a Founder War Stories with Nick.
Yep.
That's up next. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Sure. So every night this week, or every day, I should say, there is a Founder War Story feature. I think you've done a couple. Nick did a couple.
Yep.
And Nick invited me to go to his house, as I mentioned earlier, and we just talk about what it's like being a founder, the resilience it requires, some of the stories along the way, and whenever I try to speak about my experience running a 120 person company with 20 million in revenue, I kind of try to just share nuggets because I've been in the shoes of many startup founders, and I want to be in the shoes of even bigger companies. So I try to really distill some of the lessons, and hopefully for the people who tune in, either watch it now or later, they'll learn a thing or two. And obviously they can reach me on Umbrella, which is our kind of marquee conference event.
So you'll
management
be
software.
Umbrella, very cool.
I'll
Okay.
be Umbrella. I'm on Umbrella. I'm on Slack. I'm on social media, but most importantly, Umbrella. So if people want to get in touch and connect, I'm looking forward to hearing their thoughts and being as helpful as I can be. So
Cool. So before we actually tee up your talk and hit play, just a word from our sponsors, and then up next, Founder War Stories with Don Berger.
and we'll see you tomorrow.
Here's to the risk takers, the ceiling breakers, the ones who lay it all on the line, the men and women driven by a higher calling, to those who work sun up to sundown and beyond, to those driven to reach for the stars and achieve their dreams, to small business owners everywhere, those who work to change their world for the better. We honor you.
We're Bank of Idaho, committed to community like you. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Welcome, Don. Really excited to have you here and chatting with our audience. I'd really love to hear from you a little bit about what Social Tables is and kind of your journey in that startup.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. From the moment I got to Boise 7 weeks ago, you were an awesome resource, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Social Tables was a SaaS business, and we serviced the hospitality industry, and specifically we worked in event management. So for anybody who knows anything about CAD or gaming, we're basically event design software. And as we grew, so did our products. But at the core, we were event design software.
How long did you operate as CEO in that company?
From the moment I started it to the moment I sold it. So about 8 years, roughly.
Okay. And you were based in DC?
Washington, D.C. It's funny. I was in D.C., and I'm originally from Tel Aviv, Israel, which is why my name is spelled Dan, pronounced Don. It's probably on the bottom of your screen right now. And I moved to the States when I was 9. And then I grew up in New York City. So I spent 20 years in New York City. And I went to grad school in Washington. And then as soon as I graduated, I got a job. So I, stuck around D.C. for a little bit. And then I started working on Social Tables on nights and weekends, the 10% entrepreneur. And it was a side hustle for a few months. And then I quit and went full time. I had this one investor who said, I'll give you a check as soon as you quit and go full time. So I called him the next day. His name was Glenn Hellman. I said, hey, Glenn, I quit. Where's that check? And he was forced to write a check. And I stayed in D.C. for the subsequent 10 years as I, built and sold the company.
And so what did you run into that made you want to solve like event CAD? So, I mean, that's like an interesting problem to just like come to. So what problem did you see that you decided that that's what you needed to do for the next 10 years? Well,
Totally.
you didn't know 10 years at the time,
Right.
but.
I guess the first thing is I'll say that I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. And in fact, I was very uncomfortable with that word for a really long time. I always felt that people who describe themselves as entrepreneurs, I felt like it was a title you can't give yourself. It has to be bestowed onto you. And I know that's perhaps a controversial position, but to me, it's a very revered word. And only once I sold the business did I feel comfortable actually describing myself as an entrepreneur. And unlike some people who say, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was a little kid, I never thought it would be the thing I do. But back to your question about kind of how I ended up starting event design software. I've always loved events. And because, I like to say it's the second oldest form of human interaction. And, we were doing it for a really long time. And now we are feeling how important they are now that we can't go to them. And the idea for Social Tables started when I was going to a wedding. And I still had this deep social anxiety because as an immigrant, English was a second language. I was a computer kid my whole life, so I lived behind a screen. So I was really scared of like big gatherings. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could just see Facebook profiles of people around a table before I got to the event? And if you actually look at the logo, you probably can't see, but it's a table with chairs around it, and the table is a chat bubble, so hence Social Tables. And I thought, well, it'd be really cool if the bride and groom before a wedding could publish their seating chart to the people going to the wedding. And that would give people like me with a lot of social anxiety an opportunity to get to know people through their online personalities before I got to the event. Little did I know that was an actual space. Little did I know that it was being, PowerPoint and Photoshop and AutoCAD were being used as tools to design events. And I kind of went for it without even doing any market research at the time.
Sometimes they say it's great to be really, really smart, and then sometimes it's great to be lucky. It sounds like you walked into that one.
I totally did.
But that's a great story about how your own anxiety, because the problem that you're trying to solve in some regards is your own problem right there.
And just like most startups, once you start it, whatever you end up doing is going to be a few, standard deviations removed from what you're actually doing. Mm-hmm. So it was a happy accident, if you will.
Yeah, that's amazing. So talk me through the journey a little bit. So, okay, so your first investor, you quit your job, you get your first check in.
Yeah.
Take me through those first 8 months real quick.
Sure. So back in 2010, when I started Social Tables, the DC tech scene was really, not even close to where Boise is today. We were standing on the shoulders of giants like AOL and MCI, and there wasn't really anything huge coming out of DC. So it was a very kind of up and coming community. And I happened to meet this dude who was thinking about starting an incubator. And I joined the incubator. It was called The Fort, run by Fortify Ventures. And he said, look, if you guys get accepted to this incubator, we'll write you a $25,000 check. And that's what I did. I joined an incubator. And I love joining an incubator because it gave my idea validity. It gave me an office. It gave me a desk.
You're a real company now.
Yeah, exactly. It was just me and a screen. But it gave me the opportunity to recruit people to something more real than my apartment, which is where I was initially. And that was really the jumping off point that gave us, again, validation within the investor community that we had a thing, and the thing had some people believing in it. So $25,000 in was first from the incubator, then went back to some angel groups. I pitched every angel group around in DC. There weren't many. There were some more codified than others. And I went ahead and pitched them and raised $500,000 from local angels. It was initially a $250,000 round, raised to $500K, oversubscribed. Always something a good problem to have.
And at this point, are you still pre-revenue or have you launched?
Oh, we're pre-revenue, baby.
Okay, pre-revenue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
Pre-revenue. So, one of the things I tell entrepreneurs is that the metric you use to describe your traction is different every stage of the way. So, for example, back then when we were just a B2C company giving people free wedding planning software, basically, we just wanted to get as many users as possible.
Yeah.
We wanted to get as much earned media as possible. So that was the traction unit we used to get people excited about it. And then once we had the angel money, we used the pipeline to define the traction we're having and how much we have in our pipeline. And then it was up to sales. And so every time it was something different. Every round, I urge entrepreneurs to find the metric that aligns to that round that's most relevant to where they are.
Well, and that's pretty typical, right? You never go into each subsequent round preaching the same metrics that you preached the round before, because then no one would invest, right?
Totally.
That either means you didn't hit your metrics or you're picking the wrong things, right? Of course.
So if an angel's like, how fast are you growing? I'm like, dude, we're not growing yet. We're just focusing on user acquisition or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of a great story about how when you're crafting those pitch decks, focusing on the right thing that's going to speak to where you're at in your company, it makes a ton of sense. And so, yeah, that's definitely a thing to figure out. So, all right, so you're 6 months in, you've got a real office, you got your first couple checks in, oversubscribed on your seed round. That's always a great story. So talk to me about kind of the struggles of hiring those first couple employees, now getting to revenue, launching the product in its first I'm put that in quotes because we all know there's no real done in any of this world, but like talk to me about kind of what that journey. So now we're taking the next step.
Yeah, so I had a co-founder very early on, and like many of the people tuned in, co-founders, we always hear about the successful co-founder teams, Bill Gates and Bill and Paul,
Yeah.
Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. You don't really hear about people who parted ways early on. And, founder friction is real.
I think they did a movie about that.
I
the
don't know what
Facebook
you're
one?
talking about.
Yeah,
No idea
okay.
what you're talking about. But Zuck's actually a good example because he had founders and he realized that they weren't the right fit for him. Maybe because he was greedy, but also because for whatever other reason. For me, it was me and my co-founder. I only had for about 4 months. He didn't commit to going all in as quickly as I did, so we just had different risk profiles. And I was at the time even more of a know-it-all than I am today, and I was like, "Man, who needs him?" But that gave me a lot of strength. But it also made me realize I need to hire people quickly. I come from a background in computers, but I couldn't be the VP of engineering. I couldn't be everything to the company. So I just started going to meetups, a ton of meetups, and just networking my face off, meeting a ton of people in the community in DC, whether it was like some JavaScript meetup or DC Tech meetup or whatever. And I found early people that way. And it was really hard in the beginning. I remember my first hire didn't work out. I did one thing good. That was good. I hired 2 salespeople instead of 1. So trained them at the same time. Ram and Laura. They continue to be really good friends of mine. Ram led us to 10 million in ARR, and Laura was one of our top sales reps, and brought them in, one step at a time.
All right. So first hires sounds like that was largely successful, but of course, like any company, you're making changes there. I think a lot of our audience is always questioning kind of the way that early stage companies and even now post-revenue companies in this journey go through the cycles of fundraising. And you had quite a success here. You overscribed on your first seed round. So talk to me about kind of maybe where the company was at in employee count and revenue, and then talk me through the rounds of fundraising that you went through.
I'll do my best because I feel like those years were like a bit of I like blacked out.
Yeah, we don't have the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Forgive us. Forgive us our sins.
Oh, okay. So so the series, call it the pre-round, the 500 whatever and change we raised, that was the angel. Then we did a seed round. We found an investor to lead the seed round from the angel group, and then we got some other angels from some other people to follow on. And then, so that was $1 million.
Okay.
And then
Still pre-revenue.
Still pre-revenue.
Okay.
No, we had revenue.
Okay.
We had revenue.
Post-revenue.
Yeah.
Seed round. Everyone
But
take
we were
note?
charging a joke. I mean, my first customer was like $375. I'm not even kidding.
Well, that's okay, because the point at that stage is just validate that people will pay for it.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that was, I was like the Greek deli owner holding the check, like my first check. I was so excited. But we had a good pipeline, leveraged the hell out of my network. I remember I hired this like outsourced person to go on my Facebook and DM every single one of my friends back before Facebook used to throttle you and tell them about the startup just so that I can get traction. But I went to like Georgetown where I went to grad school and I was like, please buy this software. And they did. So always go to your alma mater and make them buy your stuff first. They owe you. You've paid them. They now need to help you.
Yeah, they're not even breaking even on that deal. Like,
Don't matter.
You still gave them more than they.
I'll take all deals. But we were running a freemium product, so we had some freemium, we had some like paid, whatever. So then, our fundraising happened during the summer, which I like fundraising in the summer because nobody else is fundraising in summer. So I like to fundraise at times that are a little more difficult. Nowadays, from what I understand, everybody's just building stuff, so the VCs are always busy, but it doesn't matter. There's always deal flow. But I like August, so we actually always ended up raising in the summer. So we did our Series A, which Bessemer Venture Partners led in the summer of 2014. There's a really funny story there. Bessemer, like most VCs, the big VCs, Bessemer is like the leading SaaS investor. Bessemer has these SDRs that call on potential startups. So they reached out, and anyway, the round ended up closing. It's like I think it was like a 22 million pre, and we raised 8, so a 30 million post. And back then, an $8 million Series A was a big deal.
That was a big deal
in 2014. Now it's like an angel round. But so I was like, oh yeah, guys, we got a lot of people circling. We're going to move fast on this. We're going to run a tight process. Bessemer, I don't think to this day knows that they were the only term sheet we got for the A. But it was incredibly humbling.
Yeah.
To get Bessemer's support, but it also was a turning point for me because that's when I really developed bad anxiety. I had a panic attack twice in the subsequent 3 or 4 months. I was subscribed like anti-anxiety pills. It was bad. I had to go to a cardiologist. I thought I was something wrong with my heart. It was just nerves. But that definitely increased the pressure. So that was the A. We then did the B 2 years later, in the summer of 16, and we raised 13. Bessemer followed. We had a different lead, Questmark. They do larger checks, and we raised a total of about 24 million and another 3 million in debt. So in total, across 4 or 5 rounds, depending how you count it, we raised $27 million. 23 of it through equity, 4 through debt.
Well, and congratulations. That's a hard process to go through, and it's especially a hard process to go through, which you just said 5 times.
And for the B, by the way, we had 3 term sheets.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it got better.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch on something you just mentioned, which was, kind of founder anxiety and the stress of it. I felt this myself, when I was negotiating a merger at one point in time. I didn't even know what a panic attack was until I was in the middle of one of these.
Totally.
And it's a very real thing. And I think in some regards, it's good to normalize that, like, you might go through this, and especially for some of us that maybe have some anxiety already, or, you started off talking about social anxiety here as part of this as well. And, I don't think this is talked about enough, that these issues come up. And largely there's a pretty big lack of support to meet with other peers and understand that, that happens. So, I guess talk to me a little bit about it. I know that certainly lots of CEOs, board meetings for the first time can come up and be a big stressor. So talk to me a little bit about how you worked through that, aside from just getting anxiety pills, because it, of course, has to be a step.
They work.
It's never that easy. Come on.
Go take pills. That's fair. So, look, you have to keep in mind, I didn't know what a board of directors was. I was the guy. I went to public schools my whole life, except for grad school when I went to get an MBA, which, by the way, was like not that helpful to build a business. But Georgetown's a great university.
Well, they bought your thing, so they did help you.
They bought it. And I made some tremendous relationships, especially with the faculty at Georgetown. So it was a really important part of my story. But I was the guy in accounting class who said, I still don't understand what equity means. I swear to God. I didn't understand the difference between debits and credits. When I graduated, I didn't know that. So, I didn't understand what to expect from board meetings because you've never done this before. So you can read all the Sequoia Capital blog posts you want. It's not going to prepare you for what's to come. So I first had a board. It was 3 people. It was kind of like, chill. Then Bessemer came in. They really professionalized the board. But I found that some of my investors on the board were like, why don't you, for example, why don't we discuss this compensation increase at the compensation committee of the board? I said, what's a compensation committee? Like, they get mad at you for not knowing things you've never done before. Sorry, I didn't get the, CEO for Dummies book, So the expectation is very high, and that's just the school, the school of hard knocks. Especially, it's even harder in a place like DC or like Boise that doesn't have the necessary support around you from other CEOs that may be smaller, maybe at a different kind of stage. Where in the Valley, you can just go and knock on your neighbor's door and they can probably tell you some ideas. So that was really tough. And so the board went from 3, then professionalized to 5, and then during the B to 7. We actually had 1 empty seat, so we were 6. But getting a different, and I had 1 independent director, I then changed to another during the B. getting that independent director, Fabio Rosati, he was the CEO of Elance, which is now Upwork on the market, was a godsend. I met him serendipitously, and the first meeting I had with him, I just started crying. I was like, I can't take this pressure. And he was like, I've been there, I know what you mean. And he joined the board, and the dynamic changed over time. But it took a year to change the dynamic. And the dynamic was one where investors are pressuring you to, why aren't you hitting plan? Why don't we have more senior execs? If you can't do the job, we'll find somebody else who will. Those are the things I heard. And there was a time where I was actually scared for my job as CEO of a company that I started. But over time, we really changed the dynamic, and I'll never forget, we were close to closing the deal, getting acquired by Cvent, and it was a Friday, and I called one of the directors that I had a bit more contentious relationship with, and he said, "You know what, Don? It was a tough time during the deal. We were in what's called pencils down, where nobody's working on it. So you know what? If we don't sell, it's not a big deal." And that was like almost like your father saying, "I'm proud of you."
Yeah, well, of course, right? Because as an investor, he's trying to get his money out. So for him to be like, I would still do this with you, like that's
all the validation I needed.
Yeah, Father, he's proud of you. I love that. That's so great.
God.
For all the founders out there,
Yeah.
Father's proud of you in investor speak.
That's
That's
right.
it.
That's
right.
right. That's all you need to hear.
I obviously, when you reached out to me originally, I went and read online.
Do you want to talk about how I reached out to you, by the way? Because I think it's a funny story.
Please.
Well, I was checking, because I just moved here like a few weeks ago, and I was just like checking out. Well, I'll tell the first half, you tell the second half.
Okay.
I just like saw this Boise Startup Week thing. I was like, oh, that's cool. Let me fill out the contact form.
So I get this email, and it's like 2 sentences, like, hey, I just moved to Boise, trying to get plugged into the scene. Sold my company back in DC. Love to talk to you, right? So I start Googling this guy, this random Don Berger man who emails the contact form on the Startup Week.
Hey, do what you got to do. Got to be scrappy.
So the first couple articles are like, $100 million exit to Cvent. I was like, well, that looks pretty good, right? All right.
News.
So far, it's fake news. So far, so good. I will say most successful random contact form that we've gotten on Startup Week. So hats off to you for filling out the contact form.
The contact form is an underused tool.
It really is. I agree.
I mean, we got to be scrappy. I mean, one of my favorite hacks is there's a website called Voila Norbert, and it helps you figure out people's email addresses. So anything goes,
Well, either way.
I'd hit you up on Twitter, but you're not on Twitter.
I am on Twitter. I just barely use Twitter.
All right, cool.
So anyways, random contact form. I was delighted to meet you probably a month ago or so. We had a wonderful conversation, and obviously we conned him into Startup Week, and we're excited to have you here in Boise. I do want to close our session here down. You exit Cvent, you have anywhere to go in the world. Why Boise?
So I am an atheist. I'm a proud atheist. But if I ever had a divine intervention in my life, it probably is what led me here. I sold my company. I stayed around for a year to integrate it. The year of selling your company wasn't as bad as people have told me it might be. Cvent was incredible. They kept our brand. They kept our office. We lost a lot of people who didn't want to work for a bigger company, which is understandable. But we integrated the products, and it went really well. And I decided that I did what I had to do. I didn't want to stay for longer than a year. And I was just ready to, pack my things, not just from the company I started, in the 30,000 square foot office I designed, but also back to New York City, where I really, where I thought my heart was. So I, got a place in the city, and COVID hit. So I was like, all right, well, let me just ride this thing out, and I'll move back to New York City in a few months and start my next venture there. So I hopped in my car and headed to Florida to meet a friend for it was supposed to be a week, and that turned out to 100 days on the road. And over those 100 days, I visited 18 or 19 cities and covered 15,000 miles, which is also the most inefficient road trip ever.
It's funny as you say that, because I was just picturing the zigzag
to
accomplish what you just said.
I was basically drawing crop circles in the middle of the United States.
But now we know why they exist. It is Don Berger's fault.
Yeah. So yeah, I then was supposed to head to Bozeman. I was in Salt Lake, and somebody mentioned, you should go to Boise. It's a cool town. And I was like, all right. So I just made a left instead of keep going north. And I came here early June. It was right when things were open. The energy was in the city. I, checked out the river, checked out the gun range. I checked out the lake, Lucky Peak. And I was like, wow, this place is awesome. So I started going to the bars and kind of joking, I'm moving here. It was like a joke. And then I drove, and then fast forward a few weeks later, I was driving down on one of these like 16-hour long hauls where you're like staring at like, West Texas scenery or something. And I was like, what the F am I doing? Why am I going back to New York? I've lived there. I've experienced it. Why am I rejoining this rat race? That's not who I want to be. And it's not authentic to who I am today. And if I could live anywhere, which place did I like the most out of the last, dozen plus cities I visited? And the choice was very clear to me. It was Boise for whatever reason. It was a combination of the wonderful people I met in the short time I was here, the scenery, the scene, the energy. And to me, the tech scene is like a cherry on top. So I decided to just move here. Just this couple days ago, my stuff actually arrived. So I've been living out of the same duffel bag since April 1st. And I'm super excited to, be part of this community. I'm humbled by how gracious everybody has been.
Well, from me to the Startup Week community,
thank you.
Congratulations on success.
My horchata from, I forget the name of the place, but it's really good. Cheers.
Congratulations on the success and welcome to Boise.
Thank you.
Hey guys, welcome back to a quick little live blurb. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Tonight was really a teaser for what's ahead. Go to Brella, sign up, register. You'll get access to over 80 individual pieces of content. You'll get to make your own schedule, meet with people in real time, chat. We're on Twitch, we're on YouTube. Earlier I said we're on LinkedIn, we're not. I'm going to correct that. But with that, really, thanks to our sponsors. Thank you to our planning committee, to all the track chairs, all the volunteers, and most importantly, thank you to all of you at home. Boise Startup Week. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.
Entrepreneurs solve problems. They make the world a better place. They create jobs. They create wealth. Not only for themselves, but for the entire community. And when you foster that, you can accelerate not only a company, but an entire economy. And that's why it's so important to support Startup Week.